It goes without saying that having your name on the Gestapo's most wanted list would have been less than ideal. While the Gestapo tortured and murdered countless individuals throughout the Second World War, one Norwegian soldier managed to evade their clutches when every other man in his unit was killed, though not without a bit of luck and a lot of help. In this video, we dive into the freezing cold waters of Norway with Jan Baalsrud, a legend of Norwegian history. Jan Baalsrud was born in 1917 in what is now Oslo, Norway. When the Germans invaded the country on the 9th of April 1940, Baalsrud fought against them for a time, but he soon realized it was almost pointless and fled to fight another day. He escaped the European continent via the Soviet Union, finding refuge in the UK by 1941. But Baalsrud was a soldier, and that another day came around pretty fast. He joined the Norwegian company Ling of the British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, after the unit was formed early in 1941, and was soon back in the action, tasked with sabotaging the German occupation of Norway in concert with the Norwegian resistance movement. In March, Baalsrud and 11 other Norwegians set sail on the fishing boat MK Brattholm 1 from Scotland for Norway, with the objectives of organising the resistance and otherwise effing with the Germans in Tromsø. To avoid detection after they had crossed the North Sea, Ling Company used Norway's many fjords for cover, but they only got so far. When the unit stopped on the island of Rebbenesøya, not too far north of Tromsø, they met with a Norwegian resistance contact who wasn't actually a resistance contact at all. The dude was just some random shopkeeper who had the same name as their contact, and he went on to alert the Germans of Ling Company's presence, fearing the encounter had been set up by the Germans to test him. On the 29th of March, the German frigate Rombout R56 tracked down and attacked Brattholm. Totally unprepared to go toe-to-toe with the frigate, Ling Company lit a fuse connected to the 8 tons of explosives they had been transporting aboard the fishing boat for use in sabotage operations. Before Brattholm exploded, Ling Company pulled a fast one, attempting to get away on lifeboat. The Germans, however, weren't feeling all that merciful, sinking the lifeboat and sending the entire company into the ice-cold water. One of the 12 men was immediately shot dead, while a further 10 were captured and then tortured and executed by the Gestapo. Jan Baalsrud was the only man to get away, making it to the snow-covered shore with his pistol and just one boot. His clothes soaked and already starting to crystallize, Baalsrud fled to a gully where he hid behind a rock to avoid the German patrol which was hunting him down. When they were almost upon him, he seized the initiative and opened fire, only to learn in the heat of the moment that his pistol was jammed. He took out a fresh mag, thumbed out the first 2 rounds, and then dropped 2 Germans. The others soiled themselves, fleeing the Norwegians' wrath. But this was only the start of Baalsrud's journey. Over the next 2 to 3 months, he went through absolute hell. If it weren't for a bit of luck and some brave locals, he would certainly have perished. So close to the action that they were able to see the Brattholm explode, a local family sent a boat out to collect Baalsrud later that night. The family, the Idrupsons, knew the consequences if they were caught housing a fugitive, but they did it anyway, as would many families over the next few months. After some much needed rest, Baalsrud went inland on foot, only seeking the assistance of others when he believed he couldn't survive without it. At one point, a young girl bandaged Baalsrud's frostbitten feet. At another, a fisherman gave Baalsrud some fresh boots and a pair of skis. Somewhere along the way, he was caught out in a blizzard on the side of the mountain where the weather was so intense that his eyes froze shut. Not one to give up so easily, Baalsrud navigated by throwing snowballs and listening for the sound of them landing. If he couldn't hear it, it was possible the snowball had gone off a treacherous drop. As if things weren't bad enough, an avalanche thought it would try and take down Baalsrud next, bowling him around 90 meters or 300 feet into the valley below. When he came to consciousness, he was snowblind and his ski equipment had been destroyed. Somehow, walking away from all of that, Baalsrud made it to the village of Forulflatter, where he was, entirely by chance, taken in by the family members of a Norwegian resistance fighter. The family, the Grunvolds, had hidden Baalsrud in their barn, so well in fact, that the Germans hunting him completely overlooked his hiding place when they searched the barn. While Baalsrud had gained a few days' rest, his frostbite had spread, rendering the poor man immobile. The village really came together for Baalsrud then, carrying him to a nearby fjord on a stretcher and then rowing him across the fjord while pretending to fish. On the other side of the fjord, Marius Grunvold realized Baalsrud would never survive the terrain on his own. Leaving Baalsrud alone in a tiny shed with some supplies, including some moonshine, Marius returned to the village to acquire a sled. This didn't happen overnight, and Baalsrud ended up being stranded in that shed alone for way longer than he had expected. While he was there, his feet, as a result of the frostbite, became so badly infected that he was forced to amputate one of his big toes. When Marius, along with some of his buddies, returned, they attached Baalsrud to a sled and dragged him to another higher up hiding spot, where they left him for an additional 9 days. Baalsrud spent this time shivering in a snow cave. After he was moved yet again, he got to his feet and wandered for 5 days in a state of utter confusion and despair, until yet another team found him and moved him to a cave, where he spent 17 days waiting for someone else to come transport him to Sweden. While he was in that cave, Baalsrud took a knife to the rest of his toes, leaving himself with 2 flat stumps for feet. Finally, after Baalsrud's body had quite literally eaten itself, bringing his weight down to just 36 kilograms or 80 pounds, a group of indigenous Norwegians came to his aid, attaching a reindeer to his sled and dragging him over a frozen lake into Sweden. Even if you're Jan Baalsrud though, you don't just recover from something like that overnight. He spent 6 months in a hospital, regaining his eyesight and learning how to walk all over again. After that, the British Royal Air Force flew him back to the UK, where he trained other Norwegians like himself. After the war, he returned to Norway, and while his story gained legendary status among his people, Baalsrud lived it, and he was less than eager to make a big thing of his suffering. In an interview later in life, he said, "I had forgotten the whole story, or rather, I had tried to forget it all." For his service, Baalsrud was awarded the St. Olav's Medal with Oak Branch, and was made a member of the Order of the British Empire. In 1962, he moved to the Canary Islands, but he returned to Norway in the waning years of his life, where he died in 1988 at 71 years of age. Books, documentaries, and films have been made about Jan Baalsrud, and he is honoured each year in Norway through a remembrance march. But we're interested to hear what you think. Had you heard of Jan Baalsrud before this video? Do you think the locals were brave for lending him a helping hand? Lastly, do you think you could cut off all your toes in a cave? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. And guys, if you're itching for some more high quality history content, make sure you check out our second channel called The Braved, where we go through all different eras of history to find some of the most badass individuals from these different eras. So if that sounds like it tickles your fancy, that link is first in the description below. And if you just want to check us out on our Relax Shack music channel, we use some of the music there on these videos. That is also in the description below. And if you want access to a behind the scenes Discord where you can chat to myself and the team who make these videos, as well as some exclusive videos only available to Patreons. And if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on the Facebook, Instagram, and general Discord server. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.